Morality. Tonight, we take a look at Terminal List and compare it to the book as well as the show. Then we continue our Deep Space Nine watch through and conclude with a little bit of Star Wars The Old Republic. All this coming up right now on The Writer Brothers. And welcome back to your Tuesday night home for Terminal List, Star Trek Deep Space Nine for the next 4 years or so. And we're going to talk a little bit of SWTOR tonight, a little bit of video game news. We're going to try and make video game news a little regular part of the broadcast towards the end. But first of all, I'd like to welcome our usual panel, of course. We have Corey Owen, Mr. Witch in Residence on that side, and Pollo Zapatos, a.k.a. John, over there. So, you know, direction is relative in the stream world. Also, I'm incompetent. But anyway, gentlemen, how are you guys doing tonight? You ready to talk some Terminal List? You ready to argue over why the book is clearly better and agree with me on everything?
Oh, yeah, I'm totally willing to argue about the book and the show. 100%. Also looking forward to Deep Space Nine because, yeah, we're getting into the weirdness of it.
Well, it's only kind of starting, but you know, I forgot that even episodes 3 and 4 come in pretty strong too. Like those were some good. The show, it's gonna dip a little bit as we'll see, but you know, Avery Brooks, he really just day one, he was bringing it. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say even Renee Auberjonois, like these are. Yeah.
I kind of start to doubt that it really dips and feel like you've binged it too many times. Like the reason that you feel like it dips is you just got to that point where you're like, last episode for the night.
You know, I'm
finally, and like took a break, but in reality, like you're just tired. Postman.
Fan mail from Arendi. Good evening. Welcome, Arendi. Glad to see you. You're just in time to wait for the DS9 discussion. Also, real quick, guys.
Mr. Arendi's son.
Now that everybody's kind of filing in here, I do want to say a quick shout out to the lovely and talented Maria with T and Telly. It is her birthday celebration today, and we unfortunately missed the stream, but I also had work and stuff. But please, guys, if you got a chance, go over to Maria with T and Telly and subscribe if you get the chance. If you haven't already, she does a lot of variety. She's still kind of figuring out what her show is, but she's got a lot of cool guests on, and just a really great energy and presence to be around on YouTube. So, yeah, if you like our bullshit, you'll love hers even more.
So happy birthday, Maria.
So yes, happy birthday, Maria.
Happy
Congrats on another lap around the sun, and gonna raise my enhanced water to here's to another several more.
Yes.
So with
May
that,
it be rich and prosperous.
yes, the Terminal List graced Amazon with its presence July of this year. We finally got around to it. We've watched all 8 episodes, and we have all read the amazing book written by Jack Carr,
I did
who also
not.
oh.
You didn't read the book?
I've
had
been
one job this
so
week, along with all your other
busy
jobs.
with work. I know, right? But
Okay,
no,
well-
I actually just wanted to
All
break
right,
the news
well,
like that. just
in
I
that
thought-
case, welcome to the Parker and Corione show, where we discuss the homework, because unlike some people, we do what we're supposed to. John will come back. For
you know what? No.
DS9. Oh,
Bring
wait,
him out
actually,
of timeout.
hold on,
Bring him
hold
out
on.
of timeout.
Did you forget to watch
Hey.
DS9 too? Yes or no?
Did you guys?
Did you forget to
guys
watch
notice
DS9?
The teacher move.
Did you watch
We got a
DS9?
teacher in the room.
Yeah.
I'm pretty far into DS9.
Okay, but did you rewatch past
That's for
Prologue and the
Terminalist.
one
I'm
after?
the one that brought the Terminalist in. I watched the show.
I know you watched the show, but you didn't read the book.
No. Yeah.
So you'll just get to listen to Corione.
Busy
You know
body.
what? You get to mediate Corione and I. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a requirement for some mediation here, because this is really one of those unique scenarios between the two of us. Because
So totally spoil the book for you, John, since you didn't bother. There's things about the book I liked that I thought were better. There are things about the on-screen adaptation and how they went about doing events that I thought were better and stronger. But in the end, after sleeping on it, after seeing the ending, and after the way they changed Ben's character, and yes, there's spoiler, condition alert spoiler, everybody. I can't root for Reese anymore on the show. I can for the book, but he should have. I honestly think he should have forgiven Ben. But Corione, you recently read the book, so you got more. You probably have it better memorized than I do at this point.
yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and give your 2 cents, and I'll explain why you're wrong.
Okay, well, first, because, I appreciate you letting me go first, since my points are completely unassailable. But, going into it, look, this book was clearly designed, Mr. Carr is an awesome author if you are a Tom Clancy fan. If you are a Tom Clancy fan and really like long, detailed descriptions of every single firearm that ever existed known to man, this is going to be your book, okay? Because
Here it is,
while
the stainless steel Israeli weapon industries desert.
yeah, like
Look-
honestly, like
Look how the magazine pops in and out, and the slide racks back. Anyway, that's what you're basically saying.
yeah,
I'm
basically
just
what
trying to give you
happens is
emphasis, even though I'm
Yeah,
about to
like-
destroy you on the debate floor.
it was like listening to a whole bunch of firearms demos at times when he starts detailing the information on the firearms. And look, I do get that in a book you do have to do a lot of description of situations and events, but here's the thing. For me, what drew me in more was we got a lot more in depth into the internal thought process of Reese in the book. We got a lot more interesting pieces where we acknowledge that Reese studied terrorism from an academic standpoint, and was completely comfortable using the tactics that were so effective against the United States forces, more or less on the United States forces, and him coming to terms with going, for ages, I despised the guys who were using these tactics. And now I am that guy. I am that insurgent behaving like an insurgent on American soil. And that to me was the most interesting piece of the book that didn't really translate over to the TV series as much. And that I felt like was a far more interesting thing than was covered by anything else. The problem was whenever we get into one of these deep, interesting introspections and philosophical discussions about how he's operating in these situations, we immediately cut back to, oh, and this vehicle has the following characteristics and produces this amount of torque at this amount of thing. And it was just so jarring. It kicked me out of this deep, interesting discussion about this man and what he's going through mentally. So to me, I would have liked that. I would have liked far more on the spycraft side of things, because that's really more that misdirection, that feeling, the stuff we got in The Old Man, really, when The Old Man was discussing how he was going to infiltrate an operation, or how he was going to use the various tricks of his craft in order to sneak in and get at what he needed to. That to me would have been far more appealing and ideal for me personally. That being said, I do like how the show broke things up and kept me guessing as to whether this was Reese's mental illness or they actually were out to get him. So I do think there are benefits to both. The problem was that because the book kept pulling me out for intense descriptions of various pieces of hardware, I'm gonna call it I'm trying to watch, making sure I don't upset the YouTube algorithm by using the term that we would all normally use in this case. But
gun porn.
Yeah, okay, fine, gun porn. But instead of like hardcore gun porn, if we had gotten a little more introspection, the book would have definitely rated higher for me. But because of that, I think it's a bit of a wash.
I'm pretty sure it's considered gun erotica.
Okay.
Because
okay.
Firearm erotica.
Written.
Okay. Or how about mech engineer erotica? I think that
military equipment erotica.
Yeah, there we go. Like, if I had every fifth page of the book had a scantily clad young lady in a cam pattern bikini holding whatever firearm Reese was discussing, it wouldn't have surprised me at all. I would have probably gone, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's, it's a, it's a fashion, it's an advertisement from, a convention or something. I'd get behind it. I'd be like, yeah, okay, this is like various car magazines I've seen throughout the years. But it was trying to tell a story that I felt was a little undone in its seriousness by these breakups of the military equipment fetish that seemed to be on display. So that was my feeling on it.
Well, I think it's a valid complaint. I will agree. And honestly, I don't think we're going to tear each other as hard as the audience hopes, unfortunately. Because
you see, there we go. You've consented the point. I guess we can give me the win this time.
Right,
and
so
we'll just walk
Star Trek
away.
Deep
So
Space Nine. No, I honestly, my conclusion is, it's similar to the conclusion I made with the Solo v Rogue One video. Really, at the end of the day, both the book and the movie are good mediums, strong mediums in their own right. Now, you did get hung up on the firearms fetish. All right, yeah, that is what it is. It's like if I was like, I can't imagine myself not as a car guy, but just go with it. If I wasn't somebody who's into cars, I'm not going to get my balls tingly over the description of how the exhaust is routed into the manifold or out of the manifold into the catalytic converter, or how the fuel injectors are superior to a carbureted vehicle, but then again carbureted, that type of shit. I could see as a distraction. And so, all right, that's what bothered me most. What I liked, as I said when we started this, is I still stand by it. I liked how they did he comes home and his family's already dead. I think that was more of a, that plus the funeral ceremony where they put the trident into Lucy's and Lauren's coffins. I think that would have been a better scene overall, because it would have driven home the point of how much they mattered to him, and also how much the SEALs actually do give a shit about families. And so those not having it is where the show starts to lose a few points for me. But at the same time, seeing how the show finished, I still think you could have done that, because it really does a good job of where he's driving and you don't realize it right away that he's thinking about coming home until the book just hits you. He comes around a corner and there's yellow tape and rollers all over the place. So that, like I said, to me that hit a lot harder because it was so much more shocking. However, they did what they did in the show, and the way they did about the show, you're right, it did have that strength, because it probably did work better in the show's favor for that they had Lauren and Lucy die later, and that he actually had some time with them, because that plays into his mental stress, and that plays into okay, is he making up things or things? So yeah, I think at the end of the day, make the time and watch and read it. You will not be disappointed by doing that.
I would actually, because you brought it up, I think a way you could have improved the Amazon series significantly is show how important Lauren and Lucy were to the SEAL team's families. That in the book, they described the two of them as this rallying point that the other families knew they could always go to for anything. And these two girls would take care of that other family without any question, without any hesitation. Showing them being that glue that held the team's community together, I think would have had their death had so much more impact in the Amazon series, and had it have that same feel from the book. So I do think you're right on that point.
Yeah, and then to go further, so in the book, John, to spoil it intentionally, Ben's character is definitely worthy of being taken out. When you find out that, he betrayed him, you also realize, and this is the huge difference between how they changed his character in the show, which is why I don't think he did he deserve to die? Maybe, but I lost respect for Reese as a character because he did it, because in the book, it turns out that Ben was exploiting Reese's capabilities so that he could get a bigger cut of the pie. So that, in that instance, of course, his demise was justified. Well, here we have a very different Ben Howard, like a totally different character in this series. That's why I didn't recognize him at first. I was like, wait, that's actually Ben? And I'm sitting there watching the show in the back of my mind going, come on, this guy's just using him. And then it turns out, no, he recognized he fucked up. There it is. And he was going to make up for it. And he tried to. And he really did. And I felt he atoned for it. By going to the lengths and risks that he did trying to help Reese finish the list and job, I think that he atoned for it and didn't deserve to die by Reese's hand. And that's what really kind of spoils the show for me. It is that you have such a drastic character change for first we have an opportunist Ben Howard that by the end has no remorse because he's just exploiting Reese, and it turns out he didn't give a shit. To now we have a Ben Howard who, made a mistake, but it sounded like he was kind of cornered in the situation he was in, but he did decide, I'm going to take the money, but you know what? I also do want to try and give these guys a heroic demise, and in the end, it didn't work that way. Okay, you know what? Instead, I'm going to help Reese take these guys out because it's the right thing. And that Ben I don't think deserved to die.
I feel like that was like, even though I didn't read the book, I feel like that was an intentional portion, is Ben's character, he was that's how you fall for it. You don't fall for it because he's this neurotic sociopath that's just like gonna help you if it's him. Instead, you actually think he's on your team. He's actually on your side, doing the right things for you, and he thinks he's doing it, while also, you know, having information that's bigger than the whole story.
Well,
Little
okay.
ones come to join for a sec.
Well, hold on here, because I've got a bit of a different opinion on Book Ben than I think you do, PD.
Oh yeah. Go for it.
So, consider when Ben was brought into the conspiracy. He was brought in, more or less, in my opinion, after the whole, Reese had lost his family.
No, he was brought into the conspiracy before the team was killed. He's the one that shows how they died.
Oh, no. In the book, I'm talking about. Right?
I thought in the book it was a similar circumstance, but...
Okay, I was under the impression that he was brought in a little later. But regardless,
He comes into the story later than when he does in the show. That's also what threw... He doesn't...
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, he's not introduced, but it does turn out... No, he was going to get a big slice.
I just look at it this way, that as... Like, he's a CIA spook, right? He may have trained with the teams, but he's a spook. And at the end of the day, one of the things that sort of, stagecraft, if you will, makes 100% certain into your psyche is that when things go south, the only person you will be able to rely on is you. Right? The only person. The company is not going to protect you. Your government is not going to protect you. Nobody is going to cover for you. You are on your own. So make sure if you're going to be able to, if you're walking into a room, you have a plan on your own to walk out of it. And I feel like that's what he was doing. He was literally doing what he was trained to do in a way, which was manipulate SEALs into getting the wet work done and have a plan for getting out of it for you and anyone that you want to take, keep out with you. And that is really what he was doing. He was, in my opinion, like, he's a jerk, but he's also the jerk he was bred to be, just like Reese is the person that they bred him to be.
Yeah, and I see your point. Like I said, I just, to me, it felt like in that final confrontation on the sailboat that he knew and recognized that he had done the wrong thing. Even though he was in a position to manipulate Odin's sword and to manifest it, into manifesting it into reality, he still, it's like I said, he exploits Reese in the book because Reese is taking out the competition and getting him more money. He doesn't get more money in the show. He only gets the 20 million, and he ends up, he admits, yeah, I also did it for the money, but I did try to do it for you guys. And after you decided to go on your holy crusade, I was there with you from day one. Now,
right, but see, that's the big issue I think that the show is trying to present, is that, like, he was willing to let Reese die in the original action for the 20 million, but then,
well, that's because he didn't want him dying. Because Reese was going to die anyway. Reese was except in the book, but that's a little detail. The
big thing that, like, he represents is that, like, his actions caused all of this death, including all the death that Reese caused. And his only, like, reason for joining Team Reese was because he actually felt bad, which means he never cared about all the death he had caused before.
He didn't
and
come
would
up.
Probably cause again.
No, he knew about.
He just had no moral. He was no longer the honorable warrior he always said he was.
He was definitely not entirely.
That's why the death seemed more like. It was his way, like, he didn't want to have him kill himself, but he also knew that he was never going to, like, emotionally recover from this.
If anything,
Ben was going to be a villain if he stayed alive.
Well, and that's just it. I would have ended it with, I would have had, Reese gets ready and he says, yeah, let's finish the list. But then he just says, you know what? I don't ever want, if I see you again, I will kill you. But, at this point, because at this point, Ben is chaotic neutral. Yes, he did some horrible stuff. There's no doubting it. However, he did try to direct some of that horrible stuff that was happening anyway into a better circumstance, and it failed. So instead, instead of doubling down, instead of exploiting Reese's vengeance, he joins the crusade and he tries to help make it happen. And he goes out of his way. He basically gives up his life to help Reese.
But again, that doesn't necessarily mean he actually redeemed himself. If anything, he went out with glory after being so dishonorable for so long. And I think that's the part that, like, that's what we saw, is like, what does the dishonorable warrior, the anti-hero, actually do when they've done their heroic journey and absolved some of their sins? But still, like, technically, he still had the 20 million. He still had all of the connections and all of the calls coming in to ask him to go back to work. So, like, does he magically become this good guy? Like Corion pointed out, like, he was trained to never be a good guy. Like, he's trained to be an independent solo operator. And so after being like a team player and seeing how much like hell he's caused,
okay, but the problem is,
that's where he got, like, that's where the decision comes, like, do you let him actually like be a villain again, where he loses his humanity again, and now you don't even want to save him because it took so much just to get him out of there the first time.
The problem I have is that it causes me to recall the torture porn episode, and now I'm second guessing Reese's actual intentions behind that, whether or not he would have been merciful if the killer had been repentant, or if he still would have grabbed him out by his colon and stapled it above his head and walked his guts out. Because Reese kills Ben after learning the truth, I now feel that Reese didn't have any control over anything, and that he was just a crazy psychopath on a killing ramp. And that's why I can't root for him in the show anymore. It's because I'm like,
but so see, you're not supposed to root for him. Like, as much as he is the guy who got his revenge and got what was his, like, A, you never want to be in that position, and B, like, just because you can get yours doesn't mean like it's not going to cost a lot of other people a lot of indirect harm and damage. Like, we watched as Reese, like, every single person Reese killed was somebody's child, and he killed them all the way on his way to go get this one person that had gone against him. Like, as far as like anti-hero goes, like, he is probably the best vision, but even at the same time, like, he's not a hero. He's a man who got his revenge. Like, he was a killer who killed.
Yeah, I also don't like that he killed the mercenary that surrendered
from episode
either.
1 to the end.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
That's what I'm saying is we were never supposed to take away that this guy is the.
Then what's the point of watching the show or reading the book?
Seals.
Because
the point is A, it's an adventure. Go on this adventure with this person, and B, see that there can still be light in the darkness, and this is what real darkness can look like.
See, to me, I was taking a look at it like, you guys all watched the Joker movie, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is a version, if you will, of the Joker story. This is what happens after the equivalent of one really bad day. Okay? To me, this is what happens when somebody snaps and decides to get on that treadmill of vengeance. I actually talked about this entire concept in my video on Sunday, believe it or not. Weird, the coincidences that come up like that.
John, please link that video and also go ahead and reiterate what...
But the basic premise is this, is we're not supposed to root for Reese. We're supposed to view Reese as that cautionary example of why going down these roads is so dangerous. why unchecked, an unchecked military industrial complex, which, I mean, was warned about ages ago, is a bad thing, right? Why we should have more respect for the people that put their lives on the line for us every day and treat them like the honored heroes that they really, really are. It's why, we should also be exceptionally careful about corruption at the highest levels and make sure that the rewards for that behavior is a jail sentence instead of a shot at the presidency, right? That's my takeaway from this, is not to show how awesome one dude can be, but why we should be very, very careful that the people in the most power wind up, ensuring that they maintain the level of trust that we put in them, or being worthy of the level of trust we put in them.
But then the problem is that starts to become
and if you compile all of that with a righteous cause, like he had a righteous cause. We can all agree that, like, if somebody does something to your family, you want to go after everybody who made it happen, right? And that's like a universal inclination in our biology. Like, taking care of your family is essential, so getting back at the people that got yours is important. And then so couple that with everything that Corion just listed, like, he was a trained killer, he was fighting the righteous fight of national freedom, right, and pride and honor and the American way, and then also he was betrayed by those very people and by his friends that were supposed to be his brothers that turned out to be just friends. Like, couple all of that into this righteous vengeance, and what we see is, yes, this is a very, like, big picture of why we don't piss off Navy SEALs, why we can't betray people and put them into numbers. Like, you have to take care of these people on the battlefield, off the battlefield, and for the rest of their lives, because if they start getting themselves into these situations, even if, like, it was only the cartel that had killed his family and it was because his wife had slighted another person, cartel member's wife, and that's like, she just got a hit and he went and killed the cartel, like, that's what happens when these SEALs don't have protection, is like that righteous cause can go and destroy a lot of other things. And that's like what the movie Sicario is a depiction of, is another righteous vengeance from a killer, though. Like, there's still kills. Taking a human life should not be as easy as Jack Reese makes it look. And that's what the show is like really trying to remember, is that it's easy for him because he was bred into that lifestyle, but that doesn't mean that he's this perfect gentleman who's going to save the world. Instead, it's like, no, this is why other people get to sleep nice at night, is because people like him exist.
So why then does he save the FBI agents? Okay, but then he kills the mercenary that surrenders. And I mean, okay, Ben may have it coming. I just don't agree it was Reese's place to pull the trigger. But why is it 1 minute he's actually being the proper hero, and that he's not taking out the lives that are he would be, because we would empathize with his situation warrior. Because he's trying to complete a mission and they're interfering.
But that's the noble warrior. Like,
okay, so is he a noble warrior or not? Then
he's still a fighter.
Well, yeah, I guess that's ultimately the question that we got to ask ourselves after.
Actions are supposed to be necessary.
Okay, I think we've actually distilled down. At the end of the day, we've distilled down really what the book is trying to get us to think about, and what the story really is trying to get us to think about. Is Reese a noble warrior, or a man that has been simply pushed too far?
After watching,
and that's the biggest question, I think, that's worth everybody watching it, reading the book, and coming to their own conclusion.
Yeah, because I can actually come to the conclusion. I would say the Reese in the show is absolutely just a crazy guy pushed too far, who kind of does some redeeming things, but in the end he just decides, and maybe it's because of the circumstance, so I'm going to die anyway, what does it matter? But in the book, I definitely felt he was a noble warrior in the end. But at the same time, the circumstances were a little different. Ben was a psychopath, and he was exploiting him. All the other people didn't have as much gray area that the show was able to display. So the circumstances are a bit different. So I think in the end you do have not only two different mediums, but I think you do have two very different James Reeses as well. So that's where I would say. I'd say show. He ends up just being a crazy guy cool. on a vengeance call. But on the book, I would say he was a noble.
Well,
now you see
that's
in the book,
actually really awesome, because that goes to prove that the answer is meant to be ambiguous. Like it is up to you, the reader, the audience, to decide. For me, I honestly felt like the show did show the noble warrior.
It showed aspects of him.
Well, no. So the reason that I think it showed the noble warrior more than anything is that if nobody had messed with Reese's life in terms of medical intervention, in terms of like plotting to destroy him and kill him and all of his teammates, then he would have never been tested in this way, and he would have continued to be an honorable warrior doing the things that we don't want to do or know about, but also still being like a killer and still like doing it for the right reasons. But in this instance, like he did it for the most selfish reason. Like this was definitely a selfish cause, but it was also the righteous selfish cause, which is why it was still noble, but also only to the individual. Like you can't say that you want every guy going out and being James Reese after watching this. But you can say that if somebody is going to do something like this, at least James Reese's way had the least like normal,
I would say,
like innocent people dying.
I would actually amend what you said a little bit. No, we don't necessarily want people being like James Reese, but the powers that be should absolutely fear that any one of us free peoples could rise up and be that if pushed too far. I'm not saying that that's the way to go in circumstances, but I think it says a lot about, okay, if you're going to push people up against the wall, you're going to take stuff from them. Don't be surprised if they turn into this wild, focused, crazy killing machine. And I think that's something that anybody that holds any power should absolutely, be aware of. Not because that's what we want to happen, but because you don't have the power to decide our lives and how we're supposed to think and how we're supposed to feel. Okay? You don't get to take away our families when it's convenient for you. You don't get to exploit our existence so you can make some drugs and make a bunch of fucking money in the process. Sorry, that's two, but I'm getting on a rant here. And I think that the idea of James Reese, in a lot of ways, is a good idea. But you're right. It's not something that should just be, you stole my lottery ticket, I'm going to murder you in the most horrible way now. Now that's going too far.
Right, and that's why I think this show did a really good job of showing the noble warrior in the worst of circumstances. Like,
I'll give you that.
Like I said, if he had been in the show SEAL team or SEALs and acted like this in every one of his missions, like, then you got to talk to him, because he has definitely got a very strong fetish for murder.
Look, James Reese is an effective killer, but he's a little, too effective, if you know what I mean.
We paid off too many families.
Yeah.
For the record, the best character in this David Boreanaz SEAL Team series is the dog Cerberus. He is bestest boy. But anyway, that all being said,
what you're talking about.
Yeah. That being said, I love that series. But that being said, look, to me, I'm gonna say for the record that I feel like what crossed the line for me was at the end, because he at the end in the book, it has what I would consider a very 80s action hero end. Like extremely 80s action hero. kind of end to it. Well, he takes the shot that the hero is never supposed to take, assuming it's a bluff. But to me, the fact that he was willing to take that shot, that he was willing to put an innocent's life as a collateral damage to his vengeance, was where he lost me as a noble warrior. That's the moment when he decided, no, I am fine with being no better than one of the insurgents that I've been fighting for years. And he knew it. And he knew it because when the team is taking off and leaving on the plane, he doesn't join them because he knows he's no longer worthy of joining them. That was my takeaway from the ending. And so, in my opinion, if he knows he's no longer the noble warrior that he started out as, then I don't put him up as that either. I definitely put him up as an individual who was backed into a corner the hardest way and had to make some very unfortunate decisions and used his knowledge to make those decisions. And I would 100% have sympathy for a person pushed to those points. But I feel like his glorious rampage is only going to open up the power vacuum to more corrupt people. It doesn't ultimately solve the issue. And I think that is my biggest takeaway from it, is these cycles of vengeance don't stop until we start looking at justice instead of vengeance.
Right. And what's to stop them, too, from snuffing the reporter right then and there and then throwing the narrative of Secretary of State gets murdered by known terrorist James Reese? Like, the Pandora's box of Patriot Act comes flying out of that one. So,
yeah.
But I think that the thing about the noble warrior is that the noble warrior they don't decide whether or not they're noble. It's more in the encompassing of their life and their choices. And I think the fact that he doesn't continue with the team goes back to adding to his nobility, that he's no longer worthy of fighting honorably, and so he's no longer going to fight. And I think that is in and of itself the noble decision. But also I really like this idea about him comparing himself to the insurgents, because I think that's something that I've noticed a lot more in the Neil books in the books authored by Navy SEALs, both the fiction and the nonfiction, that a lot of what they struggle with is the longer that we were in Afghanistan and Iraq, they came to the terms that, like, yeah, if this was my neighborhood, I too would pick up a gun to protect it. A, it's lawless. B, there's a bunch of people that don't speak my language carrying guns around and harassing us. Like,
imposing curfews and taking all our food. Yeah.
And I mean, like, let's be honest.
Capable of enforcing it, and that's terrifying. And that to me just goes more into Reese, like, and not just Reese, but Jack Carr, and his willingness to show that, like, the insurgent doesn't happen overnight. They survive one fight, and then 2, and then 10, and now they're good at surviving and fighting back and teaching others to fight back and do it way. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I do wish I read the book.
And still can.
And I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, when you asked yourself there, like, what would I do if some foreign group showed up on the streets and started, imposing their laws, their order, and brutally cracking down on everything that I value? We've seen that movie. It's called Red Dawn. We know exactly how it goes, right? I have zero doubt.
Gotta do it with the gun. It's not right without it.
I have zero
Wolverines!
doubt that would be the exact response about 20 minutes after something like that scenario happened in about 90% of the US. It's why I think the US is basically uninvadable for the most part, is because
behind every blade of grass.
That's it. Listen, behind every single blade of grass, somebody would be, is there a mine? Is there an IED? Is there a dude with a bayonet? Or is there a tank? And I 100% believe that would be how the US would work out. And
Oh, there's another series on Prime we could probably check out after we're done with DS9.
Oh,
or,
yeah?
Or we could squeeze it into a special throwback series or something. Man in the High Castle.
Oh, yes.
That show, John, have you watched that one?
I think I got through the first season or halfway through the first season. That's a really fun one. I would not mind.
And the
doing
OG
that
books
for
are
bits.
dope.
Yeah, it's definitely one we could. Okay, so there's books we could do along with it. That's definitely a series we could plan later on down the road, because even Man in the High Castle, in its alternate universe where the Nazis and Japanese won and are already uneasy with each other, even they had to acknowledge that in the Colorado Rockies there would be a neutral zone. Well, why would there be a neutral zone? Because a bunch of rednecks with guns are not going to give up that easy, and you would eventually just have to go, we can't win. So we're just going to have to say, this is ours now. You're left alone to be rednecks and poor farmers with no infrastructure.
Didn't they, like, pinned as basically the Colorado Rockies were like the Swiss Alps in that show?
Basically.
Like just snipers in every ridge,
Yeah.
covered by the snow, living in the snow.
Fan
living
mail
off the
from
land, yeah.
Fan mail from Arendi says, I have seen Man in the High Castle. It's really good. Yeah, I only watched the first couple episodes. I meant to actually finish it, and I never did, but oh no. Only there was some reason to now.
Only I had a job that asked me to binge a show I was already enjoying.
Oh
and
yeah,
had
no,
no
once we're
excuse to go
fully
back to.
supported on monetizing, this show's gonna be a two nights a week kind of deal. It's gonna have to be. I mean, we're gonna have to do legacy stuff. You know, we'll do new stuff
we'll
on
have
Tuesdays and throwback Thursdays. We'll bring Brandon's tradition, except without the Brandon.
Yeah,
Screw
we'll
you,
do,
Brandon. Just kidding. Come back. I love you.
We'll do like a sci-fi night and then like an everything else night or something, like sci-fi fantasy night, and then like a not quite in that genre but still cool night. Like we could do a lot of stuff with this.
And we're going to. And it's all going to be free.
Darn right.
Anyway, back to internal financial discussions that shouldn't take place on live aside. So yeah, guys, John, I'm disappointed that you didn't read this one in time, but I get it. Real life gets in the way. Shit. Even this morning, I'm like, do I want to take the week off? But I want to. So it is what it is, and so yeah, we're getting there. We want to be fully independent to be able to bring you more quality content, guys. But for now, you get Terminalist and DS9 and a little bit of video afterward. You want more content? Give us your money.
Or at least your eyeballs for now.
Yes, we do appreciate your eyeballs.
Yeah, give us your views. This really help.
Views, like, subscribe.
Share.
Any final thoughts on Terminalist before we sail it off into the sunset? Probably never to touch it again, or at least not for a few years.
Let me ask you this. Because it's never specifically laid out that Reese dies at the end of it, how would you like to have seen a sequel go?
Damn. Now you're gonna fill another hour of content. All right, next week, DS9.
If you want to create like a syndicatable TV series, I want Reese to become a Jack Bauer type.
That's kind of where I was going.
The CIA and starts like taking out these types of people, and so like this is his like origin story. And so if for some reason the tumor is to disappear and they want to make a bunch of money off of it, like make that that to me seems like a great way to guide this weapon into a useful discussion about our culture and about our like world's decisions. Like you could theoretically like make it about some giant monopolistic digital corporation that buys and sells goods all across the world, invading America and like slowly but surely just destroying its factory work. Jack Reese could like free those people and maybe unionize them. Amazon.
Yeah, so I would say that you need to read the book because as it turns out, guess what? His tumor goes away. So the book does leave, and you know what? I think they ended it the way they did in the show for that potential. Oh, they could open it up with that voicemail call from his doctor, and then all of a sudden, we have season 2. But yeah, I can kind of see where John's going. But Corey, it sounds like you're ready to give your.
So my idea, modern A-Team. We have a pilot, we have a reporter, we just need some sort of computer expert to keep them off the radar, and we could have a modern A-Team style show where they are traveling around, writing injustices, using those tactics together.
If only there was some CIA asset that they had access to that could have helped them with all that shit.
Right?
Anyway.
No, see.
I mean, they could.
Whoopsie.
This could be his invitation into taking the number 2 slot under Liam Neeson, bring him back A-Team.
There you go.
That would be that would be awesome, yet also super freaking cool.
Well, no, because
we do love it when a plan comes
to
together.
The rated R A-Team, yeah.
And I'm sure Liam Neeson's at that point in his life where he basically will just gladly take anything. So we should definitely jump and capitalize on that.
Yeah, isn't he similar to Nick Cage? Actually bought a bunch of stuff that now he owes taxes on and has to keep doing movies to pay the taxes.
No, he's just kind of getting along in age and just wants to get movies in because he's pretty much done probably some of his best roles. He could probably do a couple other great roles in the future, but he's kind of hit that. Some stars, they hit this point where they're like, you know what, I like the fans and I'm gonna just go show my face for my fans, and so they take silly jobs or just jobs they get. Some actors, and these are the ones I have all the respect for, when they get the, I guess you could call it Weird Al clout. Like, everyone loves Weird Al, right? Doesn't matter. If you say Weird Al's gonna make a parody of a song, you're gonna listen to it because Weird Al. Well, in movies, stars sometimes get to a point, and Samuel L. Jackson actually was at this point for a while when he was literally just taking anything because he liked doing movies. And some stars, they love the process, they love what they do, and they want to just be out there and be out there for their fans. And I really like when they do that, because then it's like, that they're not I'm gonna get this show knocked down several rungs. They're not doing the whole I want to be taken more seriously as an actor. Dude, you're on screen. You're already taken seriously as an actor. You get paid professionally to be an actor, you're already being taken seriously. That's it. You've hit the peak.
Well, okay.
Who cares if someone thinks that you're, X, Y, or Z for the rest of your life? It's not the end of the world. It's not.
Well, to kind of transition us to Deep Space Nine, Avery Brooks's actual passion is actually teaching acting. And that's what he primarily does. And he's quite good at it. In fact, there are several lectures that I have watched of Avery Brooks where he's on set delivering his lecture via video, and he's in his Starfleet uniform describing his acting techniques and method to his class while sitting on the bridge of the Defiant giving the lecture, or sitting in his office in Captain Sisko's office in his chair giving the lecture in between takes.
I thought he hated Star Trek.
He actually enjoyed himself a lot based on a couple of different factors. There was always tough parts, but he loved working with Sirach. He loved working with a lot of the other actors. He loved the craft of it. He just had some interesting discussions with the producers, shall we say.
Yeah, because he didn't exactly go full, Shatner and Koenig in his absolute disgust of it, but he just kind of seemed to, aside from doing conventions, moved on with no real interest in reprising Sisko.
No, but he loves his actual career of teaching acting. That's what his real passion is.
Okay, I guess
right?
I see where you're coming from.
Right, so you can have a wonderful passion for something else as well, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the fun. It's just what you were doing opened, because you did it for so long and what you were doing, it opened up avenues for you to enjoy what you really enjoy. Some people find that like Samuel L. Jackson, that he really just loves being on set and has a great time with it and enjoys doing it. Avery just loves teaching, and he has a wonderful teaching job that he really has fun with, right? I mean, Shatner, I think you could argue that doing the conventions
he's
is what
come
he
around.
enjoys most.
Yeah, no,
now,
he's a
right?
lot. Yeah, in the early, I'm talking like early days Shatner that I have no respect for. No, now I would love to shake his hand and meet the guy, but yeah, there was a time when he was like, I don't want to be known as Captain Kirk, and now he's I'm Captain Kirk, which I agree. You are. He's definitely more of an authority to speak on Star Trek than most anyone alive right now. So I'm glad he came around. I'll just put it to you like that.
Yeah, I mean, having done a very minimal amount of acting in my time in life, I would say that the thing about whenever you're playing a role, it does become a little bit part of you.
Yeah.
Right? Like you do add a little bit of it does become a little bit of yourself, and you have to have some part of yourself in the character to portray it properly. So I have no doubt that he really there's a part of Shatner that is Kirk and a part of Kirk that is Shatner, or at least what he would like him to be. And I feel like he's accepted that that's the case.
Yeah.
And I think that that's wonderful.
But I think there's something we should also recognize is the fact that, like, I think what a lot of Hollywood actors and actresses, like, the thing that, like, goes, I want to be recognized, like, they actually do mean, like, recognized, like, when they apply for the next gig. Like, when they're trying to get their next job, like, they mean that, like, they don't want to be typecast into a specific role. And, like, I think in the time of Shatner, like, we have to remember that, like, while we were getting bullied by kids at school for liking Star Wars and Star Trek, like, he was getting bullied by his peers for being in Star Trek,
which is
Star Wars. And I think
bullshit.
that's something
that
that
he
like
had to go through.
Well, no, that's where Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah, because all Jacksons
really
are the
like
same.
does the best, because like Samuel L. Jackson is the guy that will tell all of the other actors, like, dude, Star Wars is like, I had a great time in that. I will do it again if I can. And they're like, boy, you wanna go to kids fantasy Star Stars? Like, yeah, I do. And then everybody goes, well, okay, I want to roll. And then that's where you have stuff like James Bond played a stormtrooper just because he wanted to be in Star Wars and not have to cost the production money, but he needed to say that he was in Star Wars because he loved it and he showed his love and was able to stand up for it. But like, we need more people that are confident in themselves and in their work, taking on the actual like executive producers that are the ones that do the majority of the typecasting, even though they barely know how to cast in the first place. And I think that's something that really needs to be remembered.
And I think it also helps that cultural changes have definitely occurred since William Shatner played Kirk. Changes have occurred since Mark Hamill was in the original role for Luke Skywalker, right? I mean, the geeks have more or less inherited the Earth. The problem is a lot of geeks didn't learn the lessons of being on the outside now that we're on the inside. And I think there are still, so yes, it's cool now to be in a Star Wars pick, as opposed to it wasn't cool for a long period of time. It's cool now to be a captain on the Enterprise when it wasn't necessarily originally. And I think that we do need to kind of keep track that, some of these trailblazers, right, are very serious, very professional, like Shakespearean level actors that are absolutely fantastic at it.
Stuff like that, like actually learn the theater and the history of it down to the bones.
Yeah, and I mean, when you really look at a lot of sci-fi in terms of the dramatic level of the writing shares a lot with Shakespearean style roles and an epic level of experiential scenarios that occur in these shows. So you know, you got to bring in these big names to make it work, but you also have to make it quote unquote cool for their career, right? They have to be able to do something afterwards. And that's the trick too.
That's the only thing that's really been hampering the careers in reality. And like the thing that made it not cool was that like there was such an element of theater in the early like trilogy. The original trilogy was very like they're on a stage, they need to the sword fight a certain way, they need to do all these things a certain way. And in doing that, like anybody who wasn't of this stuff was just gonna judge as a bunch of guys with sticks whacking each other, like doing Macbeth or whatever. But then nowadays, like ever since Transformers and CGI really started exploding, like no, now you're the coolest starship pilot to fly the galaxy in this really dope Star Wars like starship, or you're this captain of the Enterprise and the Enterprise actually looks really awesome, and or you're in Transformers and you play a robot car that looks like it might actually be destroying the city that it's in. Like I think now that there's CGI, the executive producers need to realize that like that's kind of what we go to movies for, because we're used to real life. We've all seen outside. And now that like you can add aliens and stuff, like people want that because the aliens look like they're actually a part of the film.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
it's not this cult classic anymore. Now it's fully available and fully desired, because that's why like all alien movies are still rewatched.
Yeah. So good discussion, guys, on going into you know, setting up the importance of acting, and of course it's the whole legacy and history of it. But I realize before we actually get into DS9, there is one thing we do need to take care of, and that is, of course, a shout out to our sort of pseudo sponsor slash where I just happen to work, and that is, of course, CNC Sutlery. For all of your historical Civil War reenactment needs, CNC Sutlery is your one-stop shop across the globe for all things Civil War. Now, you might be wondering, why would a show like this sponsor a store like that? Well, aside from me being gainfully employed, of course, if you go to the main page, ccsutlery.com, and you changed it a little bit, bear with me. Come down to the movie production and historical credits, along with all the different reenactor divisions across the entire United States that you could potentially get in touch with. We've also provided a lot of props and costumes for various movies, some of which we intend to review on this show. And so the list hasn't been updated very recently, but it should be here soon. But even as recently as the show 1883, we provided costumes. So we're pretty much the number one provider for a lot of studios these days, because, well, our competition may or may not be answering the phone anymore. A lot of people like to talk on the phone, and so if you like doing business on the phone and not always online, please head over to ccsutlery.com and check us out. All right, now that extracurricular ritual is out of the way, let's move into Deep Space Nine. All right, so we're gonna start. We'll break this up into two smaller segments because we did 2 episodes, and I think that's probably gonna realistically be what we're gonna get throughout our watch through. It's probably gonna be 2 episodes a week, which oh no, that means it's gonna take us 4 years to get through the show. Oh, darn. And so with that, past prologue, quick synopsis of the storyline. Well, the last.
You don't want to check out Man Alone first? I feel like going in order, maybe.
Past prologue comes after Emissary.
No, I thought it was Emissary, Man Alone, and then past prologue.
That's not how it showed up on my. Oh, you must have Canadian Paramount. That's probably wrong.
Okay.
I'm fine to discuss either one first, but yeah, the next one for me was past prologue, and then yeah, Man Alone.
Man Alone. Okay. All right. Cool.
All right. So, storyline for past prologue. While the last Cardassian on the station, plain simple Taylor Garrick, tries to become friends with Dr. Bashir, a Bajoran vessel approaches the station at high speed, followed by a Cardassian ship. The Bajoran, Tana Laos, I remember the name, gets beamed onto DS9 just in time before his ship is blown up and asks for asylum. Benjamin Sisko seems reluctant, but Major Kira Nerys knows him. He's a member of the Con Ma, a terrorist organization fighting Cardassia, but also accused of crimes against Bajorans. Upon his promise that he no longer wants to be a Con Ma, Sisko decides not to hand him over to the Cardassians, while Kira works on getting amnesty from the government for Con Ma members. Then two female Klingon outcasts, Lursa and Bator, arrive at the station.
Okay, well, first, we run into the minor, I'm sure he's never going to show up again, character of Garrick.
Yes, plain simple side character, background noise.
Yeah, I'm sure nothing will ever come of this character whatsoever.
I'm sure his interest in Bashir was purely platonic.
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm sure he's not in any way, secretly working his own angles on everything. But, we definitely
really
see
strong vibes that this might be an important character.
Well,
I mean, if I was watching it for the first time, I'd be like, what's this dude? He's got a spoon on his head. He's touching the guy in weird places. Well, not really weird. It is weird. Who touches people like that in public? Well, Garrick does.
It depends on whether I'm trying to date them or not, to be fair.
Arendi writes in, besides, Garrick always lies. Oh, wow. Really?
Hey, hold on, Arendi. Even when he's telling the truth?
Anyway, so, John, what did you think of past Prologue?
I don't know. I like the way that it automatically went into like an episodic episode rather than continuing on the main story plot for the third episode. But I really enjoyed.
Sorry, I totally forgot to mention, and I have to. That plot synopsis came from IMDb. Anyway,
cool.
For sure. Shout out to
sorry, I got it.
sources.
Well, you're supposed to. That's the problem. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. But anyway, so like my big thing with the whole episode itself was it was fun in that it wrapped itself up, but also it felt like I kind of get really annoyed going back to old media and finding that they're still talking about the issues that are plaguing us today, and that their like cultural relevance still wholly applies. And also, like, I do like that somehow Deep Space Nine is the opposite of the way we're having these discussions now, in the sense that like there was a lot of like pleading for like that he should be freed, but then as we're hearing about what his group does, it's like that sounds exactly like suicide bombers and like the Taliban. Like that does not sound like somebody the writers would be on the same side of. Yet the way they're writing it is like, no, we support this man because he's a freedom fighter fighting for the freedom of his people. And as you know, the Cardassians like enslaved these people. And so like that's where I got really like interested in like watching this. And as I've watched a few episodes ahead of where we're at, like that's what I'm really getting out of the rewatch is like, oh, there has been a cultural shift. And also we still have no idea what we're like really talking about, because like even in this show, like the way that the Major is just fully apologizing for this man's actions and assuming that like, no, now that the Cardassians are gone, he's going to be a good guy again. And as the episode continues, like we find out that like, nope, he was not going to be a good guy. Like, no, this mission goes on forever because A, these people were born into it, and B, like no, like they're supported. Like even though the major is like, no, we're also trying this peaceful approach, and I'm gonna work from that. Like this dude's like, that's a joke, right? Like you know that the peace never works, and we're gonna need to be back and ready to fight. So we're just gonna always stay fighting. So we're always ready to fight. So we're always fighting, and that level of addiction to the cause is the same thing that we had like coming out of Afghanistan now, and as like the Orville season 3 like really discusses with the idea of like long-term warfare and the idea that like it's untenable and also unnecessary. Like you should always be striving for a way to end the warfare, even if it's a marriage with Kalons and the humans, you know, like that's a big way of like showing that these conversations weren't resolved before now, and also like we weren't even discussing them the same way. And that's what this episode and a lot of the show to me really resembles. Is like there was a different America writing Deep Space Nine.
Yep.
But it still was talking about all the stuff we're talking about today.
Well, I mean, ultimately too, I mean, we're also we are looking at a situation where, it's important to remember that Kira really was an insurgent most of her life. She went out and did some very, very dark stuff to deal with invaders in her homeland in order to try to drive them off her world. And now she's seeing somebody else who's still fighting that war and trying to get them back from the abyss that she realized she was walking through, right? So in a lot of ways, this episode does a lot of character background and growth for Kira, because we're seeing her in a situation where, she realizes how dark a place she could have gone if things went slightly differently. If she was just slightly more fanatical, she would have been on that runabout trying to blow stuff up too. She would have seen all the negative stuff going on, seeing, people who come in who legitimately were invited, who have the best of intentions coming in to try to help you out and get you to be able to stand on your own and take the appropriate place for you in a greater community, as just meddling in your affairs again still.
And not to mention, like, I think this is the more interesting part that Starfleet really resembles, especially like in this universe, is that like Starfleet isn't just well-intentioned, they're resource-backed as well. Mm-hmm. Like when they say they're going to come help, they legitimately mean we're going to send resources, bodies, workers, teachers, like we're going to literally be there to help and help you. Yeah. And that is something that, like, to me, it makes Star Trek all the more of a realized universe, because the Cardassians represent the opposite of, no, we intend for you guys to be a planet rich in resources, and we're going to get those resources. And if you obey, like, you're going to have an okay time. But if you don't obey, like, we're going to, like, everything the Cardassians did was out of this, like, no, we need the resources. We're not trying to kill you, but we will kill you if you disobey. And so they had this intention of being kind-ish, more like they had an intention of being out of the way, as long as the people were out of the way.
Okay, I can see where you're at.
I think
that's a fine place to be. That tells me that you haven't really watched as far ahead as I thought.
Well, but to me, that really resembles that, like, the Cardassians, if they're supposed to be the opposite of Starfleet for this story, and Starfleet represents this resource-rich, good-intentioned empire, then the Cardassians are going to be a darker side, but still a version that can justify standing up to Starfleet. And so the spectrum that's being is that, like, the Cardassians aren't necessarily inherently malicious, but they're also not inherently loving and caring and compassionate. And that's the part that Tannen in this episode really represents, is that he's just so used to people coming in and trying to sell that they're well-intentioned and trying to like take one over on you. Like when the Cardassians didn't only deploy executioners, they deployed diplomats, politicians, they tried to start cities that were supporting them and all that stuff. And so in that instance, like that's the way Tannen sees Starfleet, as another political wing of another empire, self-imposing. But whereas Starfleet sees Starfleet as like, no, we're actually like a very awesome collective that actually has the resources to back up all of our offerings. And that's something that this show really, to me, like makes for a fun discussion and shows the amount of world building that there is in Star Trek.
Oh yeah. The best way that I could describe Deep Space Nine, and I don't want to ruin it for you, John, because I like where your head's at. I like these ideas that you're pulling. You know, this is the first run, and it's like Corey and I got to remember that we don't want to. Yeah, we might have our jokes and laugh, and snicker at times. We also got to remember to snicker.
The story changes
right.
change, but that doesn't mean that it didn't have this foundation from episodes 1 through 3.
It's you'll see. In time, you'll understand. And the best way I could describe this show is that Next Generation and the original series are the dream. They're the idea. They're the vision. They're what Starfleet wants to be. They're what Starfleet tries to see itself as. Deep Space Nine is the reality. It's the showing all the real behind-the-scenes infrastructure, showing the fact that, okay, yes, while we should try to achieve this level of perfection and cooperation, the truth of the matter is that's not a standard yet. That's what we want to get to the standard, and Sisko believes in that being the standard, but it's always one of those situations where you know, paradise is propped up by, you know, by the reality of and you'll see as it unfolds.
I don't think that this is a discussion in like Starfleet hasn't achieved that, because like as we know, Earth
is a paradise.
The majority of the inner core of Starfleet has achieved that to some degree. And I think really what we're seeing is that like this isn't Starfleet's here, everything's happy and hunky-dory. It's like,
that's what they want you to think.
Starfleet has to come in and
build.
And it has to build on predisposition. It has to build on culture. It has to build and integrate culture, because Starfleet isn't exclusionary in their culture, and so they have to
go out and win hearts and minds is what they have to do.
Yeah, and win hearts and minds through peace, or be court-martialed if they're not peaceful. Like at no point do they have the ability to just go in and gas the station or gas the planet and be like, all right, next generation should be nicer and this should work out.
Yeah, no, that's not what we
population.
Yeah,
and I think that's a really cool paradigm that only Star Trek has given itself the room to create. Is like, you can have Eden be the home world of the main cast, but also put them in a brand new, barely like Earth achieved space flight planet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the way I look at it is, imagine, if you will, you had a whole bunch of people that grew up in paradise and put them in a place where not all the problems have been solved yet. And how are they going to go, well, this was solved by us however many years ago, why don't we just try to apply that here? And realizing that those solutions may not necessarily work in this environment, and new solutions have to be found.
It also may not have even been the actual thing that had solved it. Like, that's what they remembered from their history lessons, which, why would a person growing up in paradise really pay attention too much to history? And like the actual distinct negotiations and the distinct factors that led to the resolutions that allowed for Paradise to be created. Like, I feel like that's the coolest thing, is like these people are still humans, because like they grew up chasing science, and now they have to apply whatever science they chased to reality, and they have to find out that, like, yeah, it works in theory, but the reality of the situation is so much more complex.
Yeah.
So much more interesting too.
Yeah, so like I said, I do feel that the biggest character developments we do get in this episode are for Kira, but some of the other characters do get a fair bit of screen time, and some of the interesting kind of side stuff that goes on here as well, right? You know, we do spend, if I recall correctly, we do spend a little bit more time with Bashir, and you know, we do meet Garrick, but we also, if I recall correctly, get a little bit more time with Odo as well, and his suspicions about what's really at stake. You know, we get a good old meetup from the Duras sisters from Next Gen, which was fantastic to have, and we get to see that Kira really does rely on Odo as her confidant. And I feel like that's important to realize
and Odo
too.
have much deeper relationship than just superior and subordinate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There's a lot to that, but also that like Odo is very good at security, and he's like the diplomatic security officer, which is new. Like we had Worf, who was like gung-ho, ready to kill at any second, but also not very good at like reading a room. And I think that's where Odo really shows off his actual skill of being able to be in the room and not be the center of attention, and read it really well.
So what I would say is Worf was a very good security officer, but Odo is a far better detective.
Yeah, for sure. But I would say that Odo's security method is way, I don't know, I feel like it's the more useful and also the less intrusive. Like Worf is very much like any version of like a cop or like a security guard, whereas Odo is very much like a detective, but more like, to me, he seems more like a gangster. Like he keeps his his crime syndicate in order, but also doesn't like constantly enforce the rules and doesn't pretend like he's this G.I. Joe that everybody needs to be afraid of. He's just like, no.
Well, I mean, it's the difference between, you know, military police and civilian police, right? I mean, you know, a military policeman on a Navy vessel out in the middle of the ocean can probably get away with a lot more than a cop in an open port in somewhere like Key West, right?
That's
you have
true.
to be a lot more diplomatic. You have to be willing to let certain things slide, you know, let some of the smaller stuff slide to make sure you catch the bigger incidents, right? And you have to be a little more open to the fact that this is an open port. People are coming and going all the time. You may not be able to catch every single smuggler, but you can make damn sure that everyone knows that if they're going to smuggle there, they really have to be careful and really keep it out of the public view, which is probably the best you can ask for.
Yeah,
which
very
brings
much...
us, which actually brings us to our synopsis for the next episode.
True.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a solid time, because the next episode, it shows off his unique character trait of being the shapeshifter.
Yeah, you want me to get into the synopsis real quick and then let you?
Yeah, let's hit it.
All right.
I feel like that's a perfect opener.
Storyline from IMDb, the trusted source for stuff. I can't just say movies because that's literally shows and video games and books. Anyway, life seems to be returning to normal on the station. Bashir tries to make his advances on Dax, and who can blame him? Jake makes friends with Nog, and Chief O'Brien is having an argument with his wife, Keiko. And who can blame him? As a botanist, she feels useless on the station, because she is, and doesn't think the environment is good enough for her daughter Molly growing up.
Which it isn't.
It's not. It's basically like tiny Vegas. Meanwhile, Odo encounters...
Is that pirate port?
It pretty much is. Meanwhile, Odo encounters a familiar face on the promenade, a Bajoran smuggler, Ibudon. He's considered a hero by the Bajorans. But Odo thinks differently. He saw him let a child die because the parents couldn't afford the medicine, and when Ibudon killed a Cardassian, he turned him in. When Ibudon is murdered during a massage on the holodeck, all evidence points to Odo.
So, the biggest piece that I love about this episode is we really start to appreciate Odo as Detective Odo more than anything else in this episode. This is his character building arc, and I would also argue it gives us a very good insight into our dear Doctor as well.
Yeah,
because we start to get a lot of respect for the brilliance of the Doctor as well.
I've made this remark over on Clobberin Times, who let me get that channel up, who is also doing a Deep Space Nine in-depth dive. They're much further along than we are, so if you like deep dives into Star Trek Deep Space Nine,
and Clobby is a cool guy.
Clobby is amazing. What a wonderful person he is, and then I've definitely ruffled some feathers over there with my daring to enjoy some new Trek, but overall everyone's respectful and respects each other's opinion. But I said this over there, and I'll say it again here, and probably every episode from now on. And it's even, this is, I forget how good this show is right out of the gate, because this is where we get to begin to see the show's true diversity, storytelling methods. We go from noir, mystery, murder mystery, to, holodeck shenanigans, which I guess is kind of going on in this episode, to, some just silly fun stuff, to serious exploration of the Gamma Quadrant, to big epic space battles. And it's all in one show. Like, there's so much variety that this show gives us. And this is an excellent example. One of the other good Powerhouse episodes, I think. I think it's not correctly rated on IMDb, but I don't know, who cares. This show is aging. I mean, it was already aging like one. But you know what? Let's give a round of applause to Alex Kurtzman. You have made Deep Space Nine even better than I thought it could be with your shitty storytelling. So you know what? You get the award for making Star Trek, well, classic Trek, great. Your Trek sucks though. Anyway. I mean, it has its moments, but let's be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest.
It's all crap. Even Lower Decks with time. You know what? I'm gonna come out of the closet. Out of the closet real quick. I've been watching Lower Decks season 3. I've been enjoying it. I think it's actually good, especially compared to the last 2 seasons.
I don't think you're
still,
you're being too sarcastic with your statement, because
oh no,
if we hadn't have watched this newest season of Strange New Worlds, we wouldn't have discussed it on our channel. If we hadn't enjoyed discussing sci-fi on our channel like we did with Orville and Kurtzman Trek, then we wouldn't be here now.
Yep, and that's the one.
So it's not even facetious, and say it's completely accurate. Like, because we had to rip that apart, we had to remember why we even cared to watch it in the first place, and then we're like, oh wow, this stuff still holds up.
Yeah,
like,
and
that's the best part.
And that's really why it's worth it to me. Yeah, it's worth it to me to have the Kurtzman crap out there, because at the end of the day, we need to look at the bigger picture, especially as fans, and go, okay, while that is trash, a lot of it is trash, look at the new audience that is slowly discovering this great stuff that's already here. And John is a great example of this, because without New Trek, you probably wouldn't have gone into TNG, and you probably wouldn't be interested in. And that's just it. John's one example. I'm not trying to put him on the spot. Of all the other, how many other fans are now pulling up DS9 or TNG or TOS or Enterprise?
How many people that watched it once and remembered it being fun but then they go watch this new stuff and they're like, man, everybody says the old stuff was good and I remember it being all right, but let me go double check again. Oh, okay. I've just
Oh, it's a
watched all of it
masterpiece
over
worthy of all the Golden Globes in the world. Oh, okay.
So
again. Right, that I think is also to my point earlier is like, there was a long time when like in the Emmy Oscars and stuff wouldn't recognize these films as even being competent enough to go up there, but like you put the shows and the discussions from any of the episodes so far and you'll be like, nothing today even goes half as far in terms of exposition, half as far in terms of elaborate set design and character creation and unique individuals. Like there's zero all bad group. There is a group that we have not found a reason to like yet.
Yeah, no, and the best way that I can describe it
With
is
the intention
DS9
of finding that reason.
Without Kurtzman, DS9 was already fermenting into about a good mid to top shelf tier, $100, $300 bottle of wine. He has now made it a $20,000 bottle of wine. So,
yeah, it's gone from aging like a fine wine to being a fine cognac.
I'm not cognac, sorry.
Oh, dude.
I'm a whiskey guy.
Yeah, listen, when I come down, I'm bringing a box of Cubans and a really good cognac, and we're gonna live it up like we have really successful channels.
That said, Corione does not endorse the cool crime of smuggling Cuban cigars into the United States, even though they are technically legal now.
They are technically legal, which is the best kind of legal.
The best kind of correct. Anyway, back to A Man Alone.
Yeah. So,
these hand gestures give our show plus 10 popularity.
There you go. So, yeah, I mean, we're really getting a handle on life on the station as it's going to start to normalize through this episode, I feel like. We're seeing that, there is a life on this station. It is rebuilt-ish by this point in terms of most systems are functioning, despite the fact that the chief is basically holding it all together by baling wire and chewing gum at this point.
Love and duct tape.
Yep. And, we're also seeing that, by the end of this, we start getting the fact that, Mrs. O'Brien has found a role for herself in this place. She started a school. And if we look at this, as I was originally saying when we started this whole ride, that this was like, the next logical step in the wagon train to the stars when they settle an outpost out on the frontier. She's become the school marm in the frontier. And I'm sure having a Federation teacher teaching all kinds of diverse alien species with all kinds of diverse backgrounds and cultural stuff will never come up in another episode. But there we go, right? We're starting to see that. We're starting to see that she's managing to negotiate the interesting political landscape that is the promenade. I mean, how many times did she have to explain to a different culture, hey, no, it gives your kid an advantage understanding all the other families on this station. So at the end of the day, you're really helping your kid by letting them study in a foreign school right in your own backyard, right? We're seeing that Cisco values the families that are coming on the station and will more or less bend over backwards to try to make a permanent community work on this station, right? We get to see Bashir, again, showing off that, he's young, but he does know his stuff. And he is a competent doctor despite being very young. And we also get to see that Odo is starting to realize that maybe he can trust some of these Federation types that are coming on board. Because if they're willing to help him out and stick their neck out for him, I'm sure that, he'll start to learn that similar respect for the rest of the chain of command.
That's really funny. Okay, so when you say it's like a frontier town, it's more, to me, it's more like the incorporation of a frontier town. So now the union has like officially decided that this city is real, and they're here to make good on the offer that, like, if you decide that you want to be incorporated, we'll be there to help bring you a city and build your city. And Odo is really he's the sheriff. He's been running this lawless band of miscreants this whole time, struggling to do so because he's on a pirate port. And in his experience, the new rulers that show up, whether they be Cardassian or Starfleet, like, they're not going to uphold the law if the masses go crazy. Instead, they're just going to do whatever it takes to subdue the masses. And so what he actually sees is Starfleet was like, no, we're holding a just court, and if you really do think he murdered him, then we're going to have the evidence. It's going to be judged and juried, and you're going to do this the right way. We're not going to have a public hanging just due to mass hysteria. And I think for Odo, like, that was for him, is like, oh, well, in that case, like, now I get to be the cop I always intended to be, which is the actual bringer of justice, because I'm supported by I guess it is more of like a military institution.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, if he's like, hey guys, I'm cornered in the promenade, and the whole group just shows up and it's like, not clear out. Like that, I think Odo's never had that. Yeah. And also, even though he was the one being accused, like, the Starfleet knew that he didn't need to be detained.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, Arendi, if you're still watching, please indicate. Anyway, keep going.
Because, yeah. Well, I agree with you on that point, but I also think that, like, look, Odo also saw that the Doctor, who he's really had no significant time with at all yet, actually did care to try to find a solution for him, did want to back him up. And I think that says something too, that these guys who don't really know me, who I'm sure are not 100% sure they can trust me, absolutely are going to treat me with respect and treat me fairly. And that's a huge piece, right? Although I do have to say, the one thing that confuses me in this episode, okay, so you got an angry mob, presumably with pitchforks and torches, or space pitchforks and torches at the very least. What exactly are they going to do to Odo? It's not like you can hang him, right? Like, it's not like you can exactly lynch him, right? He just, like, turns himself into mist and goes and wanders off, right? Like,
I feel like that's really, oh, that's true. I guess nobody really accounted for the fact that.
Yeah, Corione, how do you not have the answer to your own question, dude? Mobs are stupid.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I think that's really never, like, a justified
that was
time
also,
to order.
But that was also the show's, like, it's funny because that's a double entendre. Like, the show was saying that literally while also saying that, like, in subtext being the fact that Odo can't just be beaten or smashed to death.
Yeah, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, right? It's for the dramatic purposes of the episode. You can sit there and kind of go like, wow, this is really serious. I hope Odo makes it out in one piece and everything. But at the same time, you got to kind of sit there going like, what exactly is their plan here? Right? Like,
yeah, I think it's more of the fact that these ding-dongs can be riled into a situation based off of half-truths and misinformation to rally against somebody that, while they don't have a chance of rallying against, they're going to do it anyway to make a point.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if, going on half information and buying into the hysteria of a movement is like a bad thing that we should all be careful of and watch for and treat with the appropriate level of suspicion and use our reason and logic to deduce our way out of problems and possibly, go with maybe, I don't know, like the impartial rule of law and some fundamental logic on everyone's behalf. But I mean, it's not
No,
like
but the
sci-fi
problem
would
is-
ever teach something
The
like
problem
that.
is, Cario, nobody's rating my protest sign. No, it doesn't matter if it's disrespectful. Nobody's rating it. Oh, maybe your
Well,
approach is what needs a little refining.
I
Hmm,
think
of
the
that
biggest
now.
thing that this show really shows in terms of like in terms of the crowd Odo is like, for me, the dramatic tension wasn't necessarily in what is the crowd going to do to Odo. It was more in what's Odo going to do? Is this going to cause him to snap? Because like I don't think that shape-shifting ability is, I honestly get way closer to Terminator 2 vibes from his ability.
Okay.
And so, like, hand spikes if he wants, and at that point, like that, like, is that how he handles a crowd? Like, that was my tension more than anything as like the audience member, first time viewer, was like, Odo obviously, like, we've watched him melt into like 4 different greats already. And so that to me tells me that like the mob was only putting themselves in danger
That's correct.
by attacking him.
Yeah, and I think
And-
Odo was responding because you got to think he's a lawman, so he's a good lawman, and so
In an area
Is-
that's untrusting of his species. That's a huge part that's like been reiterated throughout the whole episode, is like they were super racist.
yeah, and he didn't pull the trigger right away and shoot people. Weird. Instead, he tried to de-escalate despite being the primary cause of
He
all the
did
problems.
de-escalate.
I would agree. He did the best he
Like, he
could to
actually went-
de-escalate.
Yeah.
Tried to
he
remove
saved
himself from the
everybody's life.
situation, and they chased after him.
So just
And,
you know,
and then he called for backup and still maintained the like distance. He didn't just like, all right, now backup's on the way, I can be the big sheriff again. Instead, he waited until backup like walked him out, and then he didn't turn around and go like, see guys, I'm better than you. Like,
You know what?
he
I don't know if
maintained the moral lawman, but also like the moral accused man.
you know what? I've got an idea. This gives me an idea. Let's take that Back the Blue version of the Punisher skull, right? But we're gonna kind of reshape the skull to look more like Odo's face in outline form, and we'll call it Back the Honorable Blue.
hey, yeah, there we go.
Because Odo
Yeah.
demonstrates in a position of law enforcement what to do when you're the object of scrutiny and you're the suspect. He behaved exactly how someone in that situation should, and he sets a good example of, and throughout the series he sets a good example of not only just being a good cop, but being an effectively good cop process. Now, that's not to say that there aren't going to be mistakes made, especially, when he blows up Upper Pylon 3, but, oh, sorry, John. But, he's not perfect, but he's a good example to go by, and I think that could be a, merchandising opportunity.
I would also say that one of the things that we do see that's a trait that stays with Odo is he owns his mistakes. And, that is something, too, that is a quality that is worth looking up to, especially in the modern day.
100%.
You can make mistakes, but you own them, you acknowledge them, and you try to do your best to solve them for the
Repeat
future.
them.
Yeah.
Like that's something that Star Trek really shows off, is that even though they have 17 series all with overlapping timelines, they don't tend to A, write the same episode twice, and B, if they even come close to writing the same episode twice, they deal with all of the issues differently. Even if like they're going back and making up for some form of thing they did wrong, instead they take the time to like show that they actually can think bigger on the idea and not make the same mistake again by repeating an old line or repeating a bad mistake. Instead they learn from their mistakes and make a bigger and better show, and it keeps getting bigger and better and keeps going further and further. And it's because they go back and learn and admit where they fail. Like,
Okay, well,
so much to
so
learn
we
from
should
Star
have-
Trek.
so we should have just enough time for you to get in some gaming there, PD. Why don't we
So we got quite enough time, but you know what? This is great because it's gonna be all right. We're just gonna disappear for quick second. Just bear with us, folks. So that's going to be a rough transition. Oh well. As I get ready to set up the next thing, you don't need to see all my other nonsense. Plus, it just adds clutter. I don't like adding more. Also, I forgot which one. Dang it. There we go.
Dang it, Bobby.
So I'm just looking at all the episodes coming up. So just, PD, for your edification, we are now 6 episodes from Move Along Home, just as a heads up.
The best Deep Space Nine episode. Clobby even, you know, I used to think that one was a rough one, but Clobby, he just has a unique perspective of really showing how it shines as the best of Deep Space Nine, but we will save that for one. In the meantime, we're going to talk about, you know, guys, I'm going to be honest here. I love this game, so if I'm laying it on and overselling it, that's why. H. Marie and myself decided to start a new show called Super Quest, and it'll probably branch out into various other members of the TWB family as we move on to other games eventually. And basically, we decided, you know what? We're gonna have a show where we play through the story content of games we love. And so eventually, we'd like to do a Star Trek Online show. Eventually, we'd, you know, probably do other games. And when John finally gets a gaming PC, hey, check out the new 40 series from NVIDIA, by the way. You know, we're gonna have, and as we continue to grow as a community, we're gonna try and have more and more shows like this, and so with that, here's a little bit of Super Quest from Friday night, I think, and we began with a couple of the storylines. So a little background: Star Wars: The Old Republic is sort of some argue the KOTOR 3 that we never got, but others disagree with good reason. Actually, I'll skip ahead here. Star Wars crawl while we're trying to watch. So we actually do have it set up so we can switch between each other's screens so we can watch the same. Now, Star Wars: The Old Republic is a massive game. When they say massive multiplayer online, it's not an exaggeration with this game. This game is huge in many ways, not just with the map. Guys, all of the early game content, all the story stuff is voice acted. All of it. So when you have your character, when you have your selection for dialogue, as you see kind of popping up there behind the banner, you can actually select from 3 different answers. And of course, this plays into selecting light side options, dark side options, it's very good at keeping that role playing, at least the early game stuff. So the storylines actually span across, you have 8 different origin stories to play from, and 4 of them are Force users, and 4 of them, of course, are non-Force users. So for the Republic, you have the Jedi Knight, which is my personal favorite. You have the Jedi Consular, which is another good one, Corione. I think you'd actually like the Consular. And then you have the Trooper and the Smuggler. And so we decided to start with the Trooper and Smuggler because they are arguably the weakest of the bunch. And, quick fan mail from Arendi says, if you want me to join with STO, hit my character up, Arendi, and, alright, awesome, thank you. I actually do like Star Trek Online.
The 3 of us should get a little bit of fleet action
going. Get a casual filth, for that.
Yeah,
set up, maybe this week, maybe next, soon though, for sure. Yeah, I'd definitely be down for STO casual filth. So anyway, on the Empire side, you have somewhat corresponding classes. Now, a lot of the classes have similarities, but they also have unique. So on the Empire, you have the Sith Warrior, which is a lot like the Jedi Knight. You have the Inquisitor, which is my favorite story on the Empire. You have the Agent, which will be Corione's favorite story overall. And then you have the Bounty Hunter, which is an interesting kind of like... I like it because it's kind of like Mandalorian before Mandalorian. Like, it's a Star Wars story that kind of goes along with the main bulk story of the universe, but then it's kind of got its own thing going too. So... these stories, when I first played, took like... oh yeah, I was having trouble figuring out what screen to learn to use. These stories, when I first played back in 2012, these took like a good 3 or 4 months just to get through one story. Now, of course, it was because of the experience. It was experience-based. Now, it is so much more streamlined. You can basically jump in for free. It has free-to-play elements. arguably not as fun as being a subscriber, but you guys can figure that out on your own. I still promote this game. Try it out. Totally worth trying. And you get to decide your character's fate, more or less. You get to decide if you're going to do more dark side stuff when dark side options come up, or light side actions if you want to spare your enemies, like James Reese should have done at the end of Terminal List. And so it's super involved. I found it to be very immersive. Like, when I first played this game, and the day I got the moment I got my lightsaber, because in the Jedi story, they actually make you earn your lightsaber. You feel like a Jedi earning it. I couldn't contain my emotions, and I'm playing by myself in my studio apartment in Key West, and I started screaming out, clapping loud, excited like a kid, because that guy was finally a Jedi Knight. I felt like it. And I've played other Star Wars games, don't get me wrong. This one was the first one. KOTOR really kind of makes you feel like you're part of it, but then when they do the big reveal, you kind of feel like you're playing somebody else's story then. This one is your story. This is if there's any one game that I think that anyone I would recommend, lose yourself to it, Star Wars The Old Republic, absolutely. There is so much rich content and experiences that you can have throughout that really just make the experience worthwhile. Even its user interface, setting it up to your custom setup to whatever you prefer, it has tons of options. And so, it's changed a lot. It's not as popular as it used to be, sadly, but that was due to certain development changes. Unfortunately, follow-on story content does kind of go into a singular path, and so it doesn't have the replay factor that starting a new character on a new class does, playing these old vanilla stories. But here's the other thing. On top of following your own story, each planet you go to has its own unique storyline as well that you can follow. And within each planet is a whole bunch of side quest stuff. So if you're a quest guy, this is your game. Like, you can go do a bunch of stuff. It's not required to enjoy the game, but if you really want to get into it, into the story, there's so much lore, there's so much stuff that you can discover through this game. The customization, I would say, is decent overall, but Star Trek Online is still the best. And I've played Final Fantasy, I've played Guild Wars. Guild Wars is really close to being as good as Star Trek Online, but not quite. Star Trek Online is still the best. SWTOR is definitely up there as far as custom options go now. Back in the day, hell no. Now, yes, it is so much easier to pick the clothes you want to wear. You're not required to constantly wear your armor if you don't want to. You can do outfits. It's a lot of, dare I say, I know this is not allowed in gaming anymore, but it is fun. So, gentlemen, we've got 10 minutes to finish off here. Any questions or anything you want to add to the discussion? Orion, you are muted.
So I've watched a little bit of SWTOR story arc stuff over the years. Which story arc do you get the on the Sith side? Do you get the Twi'lek that you get to shock routinely? Because I feel like that's the story for me.
So I'll answer that in a second. What you're about to see, this is one of the main reasons I love this game, is right here. Is the side quests in the open world can do other players. Whether they're different classes, whether they're the same class, and this is the other part on top of that, your friends playing the other classes can follow you into your story instances and enjoy most of your story content with you. Like, this game used to really be the buddy game. Like, it was such a good game. Now, Corio, to answer your questions, that would be the Sith Warrior. And it's a good story. It's not... They're all good. I would argue that all the stories are good. I would just say that there's definitely ones that are obviously stronger than others. There's no real way to kind of get around that. There's your top tier stories, which are typically Agent, Consular, Jedi Knight. Jedi Knight's basically a homage to the original trilogy. Inquisitor is fantastic. And then there's your kind of okay, which Warrior sadly kind of falls in that from what I read. At the same time, though,
Dude,
I don't know. It could be a
War-
different experience. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, so I played this in 2015, or whenever you brought me into it, Parker, sometime in 2015.
You kind of brought yourself into it.
Yeah, maybe. I can't even remember for sure, but
You did. You started
no,
playing it. I
I
told you to play
played
the story, and
the-
you're like, eh. But you were also a dumb Marine at the
no,
time.
I beat the Sith Warrior.
More of a
story.
dumb Marine at the time.
I
You actually did
just
play a
didn't really
vanilla
feel like
story.
going back through every character story. Yeah, no, I
Oh,
played
dude.
3 of the vanilla stories.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't want to go through all of them. I got like halfway through the smuggler one and then realized I was tired of being level 1.
Oh, bro. Smuggler. Okay, Smuggler is one of my personal favorites,
this is
but it is
before they
weak.
made it all better with the experience thing. Like that really slowed me down on replaying all the levels. Was like
Okay.
going back and having to also replay all the tutorials.
Replay all
and
those
then
side
earn-
stories that you already played once. Okay,
Yeah.
that is fair. That is
Yeah,
not a problem
and
anymore.
now,
Your
like,
story
this new
XP
method
will
sounds
will
so
boost.
much better.
Oh yeah, no. This one, Smuggler is one of my personal favorites, but it is definitely not like, ooh, I was so blown away. It's basically Han Solo, the video game. If you play as a male smuggler, now the female smuggler is still a fun experience. My wife did that; she liked it, but I definitely have to say that male smuggler is, if you're wanting that Han Solo, get the Millennium Falcon experience, this is it. I mean, you even get a Wookiee companion as the smuggler. So, you get a lot of other cool companions too. And that's the other thing. Like, you can, not only can you shot color the Twi'lek, you can also, bump space uglies. You don't actually see it. It's still a team game. Don't get too crazy, but they do it the way that I like doing it in this type of game, where it's just kind of implied, but it's still family friendly. It doesn't ruin the experience for everybody.
Yeah, things progress to a certain point, and then you could either decide that they just got together and played cards in their room, or things happened. I gotcha.
It's still safe for all ages overall. There is romance, so I definitely wouldn't subject this game to anyone under the age of 12 personally, but that's just me.
I would say one of the big selling points of this game is this is a lot of like what we talk about with different universes being dissected, and each little dissection being its own instance. So like, even though it is the Han Solo experience, it still takes you through the entire universe, but just as if Han Solo did it. And that, I think, is the really like the thing that most games, especially that are going to be adapted from other universes, and just most like universes in general, need to really realize is like, yeah, we're always going to end up probably telling an old story over again. And even if we are, like, we just need to make it worth listening to in order for it to be heard again. People aren't going to feel bad that they reheard it. They're really going to feel bad that if they reheard it and it sucked. And that, I think, is what SWTOR has done really well, is that like they dissected the entire Star Wars universe into these 8 different classes, and each class is also one of the original like 8 characters. Like the Jedi Knight is very much Luke Skywalker. The Counselor very much is Obi-Wan. And like the Warrior is Darth Vader, whereas I can't remember what the Sith version of the Counselor. The Inquisitor is very much a Palpatine. And I think that's what makes this game so awesome, is they were like, look, we know that most of you just want to play as one of the characters, and so we're just going to create a class around that type of person, so you can then pick to be all of them or one of them. Yeah. And I think that's really awesome.
And then in the case of the Consular, you can do some messed up stuff, dark side. Like some screwed up. Now, this is the big change, John, that you might not be aware of, that they just implemented with their 7.0 expansion. And that is the introduction of combat styles. So now you aren't limited to your 2 advanced skill trees on your class. Now, if you're a non-Force user, you have access to all of the non-Force user classes, and you can pick 2 of them if you're a subscriber. if you're a Force user. So now you can actually properly play a dark side Jedi by picking a Jedi class and going with a Sith skill tree. I now have my Jedi Guardian that I've kept as full pure light side forever, and probably will just out of habit. I now made a Sith assassin now. That's his night job is. So you can act, and I was originally gonna go Shadow with it because I wanted to do the stealth, but I'm like, let's be honest. While I do try to be that good boy, I'm a dark side kind of. I got a dark side too. It's there. It's better to acknowledge and live with it, not pretend, oh, guys, I'm so good all the time. Because I'm not. But I try. So yeah, I just, oh, wow, clock got away from me. We're almost done with the broadcast. So any quick last comments on SWTOR before we close it out tonight?
No, I think you guys sold me on it. I think I'm going to have to try downloading a copy and seeing what I get from it.
You know, I know I just got you into STO, and I'm sorry to kind of change, swing from another tree, but I do still have STO. I just, it's...
Yeah.
I've got so many ships. I've had so much time. I'm actually taking a break right now. But we will definitely get with Arende and get a...
yeah, we got to get a fleet action going, something.
Yeah, get a task force operation. So, once again, just another happy birthday shout out to Maria with Tea and Telly. Love you. We hope to have you on this show very soon. Just need to make that happen. Also, another shout out to all of our subscribers and to our listeners on the podcast. Thank you guys so much for helping us grow, get us out there. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. And
yeah, we love all you guys.
Everything you do counts. And well, we'll be back next week with more 2 more episodes of DS9, and well, we'll update our Twitter respectively to let you know what else we're going to get into, because we didn't get that far this week. It's just...
And remember, if you throw your hands up in the air like you just don't care, make sure you put your coffee cup down first.
Absolutely. Yeah, please be sure to check out Corey Owen's channel, and with that, we'll be back next week.